Hello and welcome back to the Handstandcast with me, Emmett Lewis, and my co-host, Mikael Christiansen. Do I have to ask you how it's going, or is it just the same?
Uh, it's about the same, except that I've been on instant coffee for the last 5 or 6 days, I think, because I've gone to the supermarket at least 5 times, three of them to buy coffee. And I've come out of the place without coffee, including today. Or like actually today, I told myself when I left the gym, okay, I need to go buy coffee, but I just didn't go to the supermarket.
No.
So
Is the supermarket out of coffee, or are you just getting distracted?
No,
by
I just didn't go there, or I went into the supermarket and I bought a bunch of other things and then left. Like literally, I just fucking forgot to buy coffee. So, yeah, not great. Other than that, I mean, as usual, can't complain too much. But yeah, how about yourself?
I'd like to say something different. I'd like to say I'd even gotten out of my chair since the last time we recorded a podcast. And that's just not because we're recording two in a row. We're recording them every single week separate. But yeah, I've invented a new diet. Actually, I'm testing it out over the last month. And I have to say, I'm onto a winner. More to be revealed about that once I release my diet book. But I'm ready for diet book fame.
Holy shit.
Yeah, I know. It's amazing. It's working. And it's such a gimmick. It's the world's biggest gimmick diet. It's going to be amazing. But anyway, it's going to be the new keto. That's how good it is.
Speaking of, I was I'm doing anthropology, like an anthropology course now on online, just with a PhD guy that is running a course. Guy that lives in Australia, but
plug his course because you seem to be enjoying it.
Yeah, it's really damn good. Very, very nice stuff. But yeah, he's really into like medical anthropology and stuff, and he was also like he's the interesting thing is that like he brings up stuff regarding that, like dietary stuff, without it becoming from kind of the culty dietary people's direction, just in terms of like evolutionary biology and like what has influenced what in terms of like at like how anthropologists have documented these various eating habits and like the absence of or presence of various diseases and so on and so on. So like he was speaking a bit about today. So
cool. It's kind of interesting. I suppose we should introduce our topic because we can get into that, I suppose, in our topic today. So we are going to have a bit of a ramble cast today and just talk about hobbies, basically. It's one of those hard ones to categorize, but there is hobbies and other activities beside hand balance that you might choose to do because you're into hand balancing, or things that we do because we are possibly the personality types that are into hand balancing that you might enjoy. So it's always this kind of thing. I suppose you've gotten this question just as much as I have, is like, I train hand balancing, but what else should I do to help my hand balancing?
Oh yeah, that's one. Yeah, like I've gotten a lot of interesting, how should I call it? I've gotten a lot of interesting thoughts, at least on that subject. Yeah. But I think that a little bit too often those thoughts concern themselves as in like you have hand balancing as this like primary focus of your entire existence, and then like everything else that you do must somehow feed back into this, and like, oh, should I juggle to improve this, or can I do proprioceptive drills? You can just chill the fuck out, and you can do whatever the hell you find interesting, because hand balancing is hand balancing. You train that while you train it, and then your brain and your physiology and your cells will do the rest of the stuff. So you might as well just have a good time doing other things. But of course, like there are loads of different disciplines that intersect and kind of that can certainly take use of hand balancing, or hand balancing like be informed by, or like kind of and all of that stuff. But yeah, I think it's for me, that is kind of the thing that trying to do. Like, I mean, I was certainly more like that because I was also very zealous earlier in my career. But I think that like it doesn't ultimately add on as much as one perhaps would like it to.
Yeah, there's definitely, it's always this kind of thing. I was like, I think some things, let's face it, particularly if you're listening to this podcast, there's a certain psychological profile that we could say you might have, that you're part of, or other stuff. Whereas just like, oh, if you're into hand balance, you'll probably find these other activities kind of fun because they use the body in a similar way. It's kind of like you're saying, informed by or using. It's like if you do handstands, if you develop a body that can hand balance, well, it will probably be able to tumble to a certain degree quite easy. It
If you're
will,
not me.
yeah. Yeah, you can tumble a little. I've seen you.
Very limited.
You can do air flares, so
Ah,
we'll give you that. It's
old
not
man.
tumbling because it goes in a circle, not a straight line. But yeah, so you'd have like disciplines that the body that can handstand can handstand well, can probably do aerial. It can probably take up aerial disciplines. It can probably do climbing. It could probably do yoga. It's these kind of disciplines that are kind of interesting, I suppose, or kind of complementary. Or if you took them up, you wouldn't find it hindered. You would find maybe the training would inform your hand balance. It's definitely one of these things. We've noticed this. Like people who can tumble pretty well, as the thing me and Mikael saw of last year, generally learn one arms faster than people who can't. Is something. So if you go, oh, I
Yeah.
can tumble, maybe that would.
Yeah, I think it's
Yes, sorry, go on.
no, like just the internet here was a bit choppy. But yeah, like I have seen, yeah, particularly this with like just, I mean, obviously acrobatics are using a lot of the same type of body control and sensation in the space, and of course, like a lot of the strength is similar and kind of. I mean, you're using the handstand element through loads of that, so it's in any kind of discipline like that. And I think a lot of people come into, or like not necessarily everyone, but a lot of people come into it from various things like that, whether it's like going from conventional strength training into some other like circles where people do various things and end up liking handstands, or if it's like ex-gymnasts, of course, have like huge benefits learning hand balancing because like if they've done any kind of like real gymnastics, they've done lots of handstands as in relation to that. And then you have, yeah, like we talked about before, breakdancing, capoeira, pole dance, any kind of circus arts or hand to hand, or yeah, there's just so many things that like will intersect with this just one specific movement skill, but which will help with loads of other things once you get good at it. So that's what I think is nice with handstands, is that it intersects with quite many things, and quite many of them you might benefit at least a little bit in those disciplines by learning to handstand.
Yeah.
And like, of course, if you're a football player, like it's not going to change your world to learn a handstand. Then it's more kind of a hobbyist thing. But if you are involving like calisthenics style movements to any degree, then just that scapular control and sensation and understanding upside down will be valuable.
Yeah, definitely. There's one of these things actually just to throw out there on the table. So over the last few years, I've had the privilege to work with a lot more people, and I've noticed something consistent, that people who trained martial arts either as a kid or currently do, and now there's some caveats here, generally learn one-arm handstands faster than people who don't. And it's interesting that I kind of narrowed it down a bit. And, maybe I haven't got enough data to say anything conclusive, but it's something that's definitely got me thinking and observing. Where if you get someone who does like kickboxing, boxing, MMA, judo, ones that actually have a strong combative element and they are fighting, they generally don't learn one arms fast. But the martial arts that have an emphasis on forms, generally slower ones, but still faster ones, generally pick up one arms quicker. Generally pick up handstands quicker. Just this whole proprioceptive and this whole almost body in space perfectionism really has a weird transfer over. It's kind of, say with yourself, you learn handstands pretty quick. We could list off a few of the other things. Is it Matt Pasquette does Kung Fu as well?
Matt.
Yeah,
I mean, he's very deep into kung fu actually.
yeah,
But yeah, he also did breakdancing though. So like he
yeah.
has had like several kind of acrobatic kind. He did tricking and stuff, but certainly there's parts of it that intersect.
Yeah, and it's kind of weird. I've got one of my, I don't want to say he's not super old, he's just a bit older than me. So one of my older than me clients, he doesn't train handstand. He trains a mix of everything with me. So he's doing handstands, bodyweight training, normal weightlifting, a bit of everything really. And he also trains Tai Chi and some other Chinese martial arts. And he's just been killing it on the handstand. Excuse me, just killing it on the handstand progress. He's just been like had this very weird vertical strength curve and proprioceptive development curve that is just rising very quickly. And it's the same thing if we think of like just think of other kind of clients as well, where it's like they're just doing things faster and getting things faster coming from this background of martial arts. And I really do think it is that kind of, particularly when you have a martial art that has a prescriptive form that has to be done in a certain way. And you probably see this with ballet as well. If you think of ballerinas who learn handstands as well, they
Oh
generally
yeah,
learn it quite quick.
dancers learn
Yeah,
ridiculously fast as soon as they get some grip strength usually.
yeah. So it's just this idea of like feeling the body in space and translating that sensation to a visual representation of what you're doing, or vice versa. Knowing when someone demonstrates something or you see something going on, and then having the ability to match that positioning to your own internal body map. It seems to be one of these skills that crosses over more from, seems to come from these precise form arts more so than you would say judo was just focused on just straight up throws or just Greco-Roman wrestling or something. It's definitely, as I said, I don't have enough data on this to say yes, it is a thing, but it's definitely an observational thing that seems to be interesting to me at the moment.
Yeah. Like one thing that, like, when I think back to I used to do karate for like 10 years and I was extremely into it. Like, I tend to become with the various things that I do. But I think one thing that helped me a lot when it came to kind of the later stages, and this, I mean, the lesson is profound in one sense, but it's nothing magical. It's just that, like, at least like many of the Eastern martial arts, since like you say, they have a focus on form and they have a focus on repetition, like a mindless amount of just you just embody the movement and you do the movement again and again and again and again and again, and that's all there is to it. Like, you have a analytical kind of there are a bunch of things you need to understand. There are technical and so on, but from there on, it's just an enormous amount of practice, and it's you and the movement, and it's only that, and you just keep on doing the punch, and like the teacher might like give you a correction or two a month, but like you'll do the same punch again and again, like for years, and the stances and all of that. And I think that discipline that brings, and the for me at least, there's just deep sensation that this is working. Like, I have now an embodied sense that like doing this works, and why shouldn't it work in another context? I think for me that was a very relevant kind of opening, or like eye-opening thing, when I kind of noticed that like, oh shit, it's actually like a significant or just that type of practice is the same when you do handstands. You're just repeating the same task over and over and over again. So but also, and just also the one thing that's important to mention, because now we've been talking about all these various styles of movement that will be beneficial and so on, and I'm sure some of you are going, oh, sad face me, I never did any of these when I was young. I am probably doomed to stay in the cesspool forever and never managed anything ever in my life. No, and that is nonsense. I mean, the practice is largely specific, and like it's going to take time anyway, and for everyone it takes a long time on average. So just to again, like, we're not telling you here that like just as we said in the beginning, it's not like, oh shit, you need to take up martial arts and dance, that then you're going to get better at handstands. No, just practice your handstands and try to find them enjoyable now and then between your cursing.
Yeah, this is kind of the thing of Yeah, these are all observational things, and obviously there's crossover between all the acrobatic disciplines and everything. But these are more on hobbies. They're just like people had these hobbies and observationally they've done well. Now the interesting thing is you could put it down to like, is the hobby what made them do well, or is it just like most kids or most people? They try something out, you do a few classes, then you decide whether you like it, and then you stick with it. And is it the same mindset that goes into rote drilling of forms and other stuff versus rote drilling of handstand drills, the same thing that made them successful, or is it the drills themselves? Who knows? So just bear that in mind. But it is definitely one of these things to consider. Just, you know, solving the problem with the body, I suppose, can be one way to think about it. And there is, you know, handstanders like to solve problems to a large degree. It's kind of one of these things. It's like, oh, I have a problem. Here's a presentation. Solve it. Same goes with like climbing. Same goes with martial arts. Same goes with all these things. It's like, oh, it's just one of those things that like can get, I don't know, fascinating, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that it's like I noticed that a lot with. I didn't even remember. Like I was reading an article by a guy named Mark Manson. If you've heard of him,
he's the shut the fuck up guy, isn't he? Or
yeah, it's him. I read an article. It's many years ago. I just came across his website for something like a friend of mine sent me, and it was an article where he was writing about like what kind of makes people quote unquote happy. Like he's not too big of a fan of the happy term, and neither am I. But like what was kind of bringing some sort of satisfaction to people, and what he said was it was problem solving. And I mean, you could essentially kind of boil things, like various things that we like to do, into problem solving. Like you have a thing that is like an obstacle or a challenge or just a thing that is present, and then you handle that thing, and the handling of itself will kind of bring some sort of satisfaction. And of course, handstands have an extremely tangible parameters in terms of this. Like either you stay there or you didn't. I mean, like the entire circus, it works a lot with that, as we talked about before, with risk and everything. Like I risk the failure by doing the thing, and then you have like the overcoming and kind of the catharsis and like the overstepping of your own boundaries and so on and so on. But I think the problem solving is extremely I think for many things, perhaps most things, but yeah, in handstands, I think it's so tangible. And the fact that like when you're standing there, like you're spending so much mental energy to build up to being able to understand and execute and to be able to do this one skill that you're working on. And then in the executing moment, all of that process is just like, it's not present. Like you're just there and things are somehow seemingly reacting correctly, and everything else is blurry and fades away, and like your focus is on this very, very limited kind of point of your existence as you do that, and you're constantly problem solving every single second. And I think also in terms of the practice and why it tends to attract very obsessive people is that you never know whether or not you can solve the problem. And I think it's a bit the same with juggling, many arts certainly, but with a lot of the ones that have high volatility, such as handstands and juggling, you will return, and you will kind of you almost need to test and see if you can still do it on certain things. Whatever is on your technical limit, you need to see, okay, do I still got it? Do I have it today? Do I not? Like, am I able to solve the problem again? Because the problem will almost be unique every time compared to, let's say, like, if you're a damn good acrobat and you can backflip, like, and your backflip is solid, you've backflipped for many years, like there needs to be either you need to just like become a slob and stop training for a number of years, and you might still be able to backflip. Like,
I know a few people like that who are like,
yeah, I know tons. Like one friend of mine, like he became a taxi driver and hadn't been done acro for years, and then we were out one night and he was fucked up drunk, and we sat in the subway and he just sat there sleeping, and he just like said to us like, okay guys, next stop I go out and I do cartwheel full twist. And he was shit faced. He just stumbles up, goes outside, and as he does the cartwheel, like you just see the reflex kicks in, everything is tight and neat and perfect. Cartwheel, full twist, sticks it, goes back in, falls asleep on the fucking thing. So, and that's not saying acro is easy or anything, but it just presents itself slightly differently. Whereas like when you have a thing like a backflip, like it'll stick to the degree that like it's not as much of a problem solving process each time, and perhaps you'll need to move on to another thing. Whereas kind of the handstand control, yeah, it just carries that kind of volatility that I think, yeah, attracts people that like that type of problem solving.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely yeah, I can think like now that I'm a bit older as well, some of my more acrobatic friends who kind of quit and gotten out of shape or got other jobs or got real jobs, TM, all this kind of shit. And there's like, they can still throw down, they can still tumble, particularly all the tumblers, people are good. They can still just do it, even though obviously they're not doing their highest level things, but it's just like, yeah, drunken backflips have definitely been a feature over the years. Yeah. It's just like, oh, whereas drunken one arm after like 5 years of not training it.
Yeah. Very difficult.
Yeah. So there's that kind of thing. So it's kind of, yeah, this kind of thing, I suppose. I'd like to talk about actual hobbies. I know we've got a selection for you. I know we've been asked about them a bit. Is it's kind of one of the things I have on hobbies. Like, so at the moment, what hobbies do I have? So at the moment I have like leatherwork. So over the years, I got into sewing. So just a bit of background is my sister is a fashion designer, or works in fashion. I'm not sure she'd call herself a designer anymore, but she does this kind of thing. So I kind of got into it because she was into it, like just knowing a bit of what she's doing. Then I decided, okay, I was going to do leather work. So I got into that more. And what I really found interesting was this idea of having, say, you just have this kind of hobby where it's like, oh, you're manipulating an object, but it's not object manipulation like juggling. That there's kind of like a tool usage that requires you to be almost infinitely precise. And then it's visually right or wrong. It's like you try to stitch with your hands, you make the hole wrong, it looks bad. Boom. Yes or no, you've done it. And it's this kind of like, it's a very micro view. And then if we zoomed out a bit, I'd have object manipulation and juggling and all these kind of other hobbies I would do, or in that sphere, which kind of are using a tool, but there's kind of a bigger, more body movement involved in it. Then you'd have like acrobatics, handstands, which are kind of a bit more physical, but still precise, going all the way out to things like weightlifting, where you'll just be like, okay, weightlifting is just like, it's basically the most physical thing you can do. Pick something up that's really fucking heavy. And having these kind of hobbies that span this kind of thing, I found it very beneficial. I think maybe not in terms of crossover between the hobbies, but in terms of actual just my own self-development. I was really like having this idea. I think it's kind of missing a bit almost in, say, if we're talking to people who are more into movement culture there, where no one has really sanctioned it as a thing to do in movement of like tool usage, and not just like, oh, I'm using a ball or a stick or something like that. It's tool usage, object manipulation, but really precise stuff where you're like, okay, I'm going to make something out of something. I'm going to try and be infinitely precise, because this is what we do with humans. We use tools, and we have gotten really fucking good at it. And it's just really interesting to do, to have a contrast between like, oh, particularly one of the things I found about the leatherwork, it was just very satisfying, because I would start a project and then I would finish a project and I'd have something to look at. Whereas in a lot of the physical stuff we go, it's like, oh, I'm learning a new something. I can do the something for 4 seconds. I can now do it for 5 seconds.
Yeah,
the progress never stops. There's no real end to it. Whereas when you have a kind of hobby where you're like making something with your hands, where you can get really into kind of details and everything, and then it's done, then it's like, it's just nice in terms of like, oh, there's a bit of development here and a bit of like pat on the back, I suppose, for yourself. Whereas like, particularly we're talking the hand bouncers, it's like, let's face it, if you get the handstand bug and you want to push for one arms, and even not even if you want to push for one arm, it's basically endless, even if you just sort of stay on 2 arms and go, oh, my Mexican isn't deep enough this week. Oh, yeah, this kind of thing.
Yep. Yeah, but I really agree. Like I in my first thought, obviously, it's like all the origamis that I have on the shelf here. Like people always ask me, like, it's very fascinating. People never ask me, so what do you do with your one arm? Like they never do, but they ask me every single time I've folded a model, so what do you do with them afterwards? What the fuck does a painter do with his painting? He hangs it on the wall. Like, I put them on the fucking shelf. I make them, and then they're there. They're nice to look at, but like it's for me, it's more about the process, and then like looking at all of them up there is more kind of memories, like whenever I made them, or like I mean, like I can see my progress in terms of my development through it and all of that stuff. So it's it's something really satisfying in that kind of having created something type of feeling.
Yeah.
But also like you mentioned something there, and that's one kind of call out I'd like to have on kind of the movement culture, a way of thinking of things, which I mean has a lot of good things, but it is very focused around a certain subset of skills, and somehow they have always stayed very close to those skills. I mean, like that stuff that Ido Portal did like 10 years ago, it's basically in that same area that everyone has kind of stuck around, in the terms of like you do these movements and you do that movement and you do those stretches, and then you practice a bit of rings and this and that, and there's nothing wrong with that, but those are a particular choice of movement practices and nothing else. Like they are not superior or special in any way, they're just simply a chosen few. And what I think is that like you can choose whatever ones you want, if it's ice skating and like that, learning popping and fishing, for example. But that is the thing, and like why it's like if you're kind of, I guess, if you're into physical culture, into physical training and stuff, then you'll search for loads of other things that are physical training based, and kind of put a lot of kind of maybe your like self-development or your kind of just sense of being, well-being, like you're like yourself in that, and that's fine. But I just think that there's just so many more things that you can do that don't need to have with physical training to do whatsoever, such as learning a new language or playing an instrument or folding a paper or learning to draw. Like learning to draw is incredibly precise movement work. Like when I fold paper, it's also incredibly precise movement work, but starting to analyze the movement work within it is a waste of time. Like you fold the paper and you try to make it look nice, and then after years and years of experience, you have a sensation and you have some intangible skill with it that you can't put a name or a kind of, you can't put a finger on it and like, oh, I have isolated my extensor digitorum longus to do this. No, you just fucking do the thing, and then you get good at it. And like I think that's also, if you look at kind of when skills turn into art, sort of like that is when someone kind of are able, like the jazz musician who lets go of the plan, or like when you're able to make a twist on things. Like, I mean, the most satisfying thing I've done like the last couple of months is when I folded Illidan Storm Rage in origami, and I found a flap on the model that I think was used for the hair on the back side of the model, but there were two of them. So I decided to find a way to slip it through another flap and make it into a bigger ponytail than the original had. And I'm like, fucking cool. I'm so happy about that fucking flap. It's the main thing I'm happy about on the entire model. And it's just like, there I did something that was interesting. That was fun. So I think it's important to, or not important. It is a possibility of all the things to do to play with what you have. And I think that like going a little bit away from the regimented, you have to do it like this kind of thinking can be healthy for that.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's I think this idea of like having a bit of skill and a bit of experience in something tactile, and then just learning to tweak it. Like it's the same thing whenever I made something out of leather, or made something lately anyway. It's just like I'll find something I like, but then I'm not going to make a pure copy of it. I'm going to tweak it or change the design slightly and just make it kind of, this is my one, just to avoid straight up ripping off someone. Let's face it, as that. And also just go like, okay, this is my take on this. And that's always kind of quite interesting. Just to like, because let's face it, it's probably similar to origami, but a lot of kind of things like there's only so many ways you can make a bag. Let's face it.
Yeah.
But then it's like, but there is little details you can tweak and little different ways of construction that will make it a bit different to someone in the know. So it's that kind of things that are interesting. Now, I'd like to talk about your project, and I'd like to talk about my next one coming up. But first one, Mikael's been working on how big is this sheet of paper you're working on?
Yeah, so the next one is it's the biggest sheet since 2012 when I made Ryujin. It's a 2x2 meter paper. So I basically I was writing on Instagram with an origamist from Scotland named Grant, and he's really experienced and he knows a lot of people in the community. I'm kind of like I've never been to an origami convention, and that pains me. I was supposed to go to one actually before coronavirus came and then ripped. But yeah, so there is an enormous model of King Ghidorah from the Godzilla movies. So Ghidorah is like a 3-headed dragon with like huge wings and like 2 tails and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
And like I'd seen the model before online, but like it was so kind of like astounding that I was like, because there's something called kirigami, and kirigami is when you use several sheets. So I was wondering if it was a kirigami model because it just looked a bit on the extreme side. Just the size of the wings were just immense, and I just like how the hell has he made this? So when I was speaking to Grant, like I said like, oh shit, I really like check this model out. I'd love to fold it, and he just writes like, oh yeah, it's your lucky day, and he sends me the crease pattern to it. And like the Twitter of a Chinese guy that I don't know the name of the guy, but the designer of it, and there's some pictures and stuff. And it's when I fold like the complex models, I first fold like usually like a lot of the complex ones go on a 64 grid, and 64 grid is rather like there's a lot. You have a lot of opportunities with 64, but this is 128 grid, and the head is on 256. So it means that you need a massive fuck off sheet.
So let's just explain that grid thing for a second to people. So when you're folding a grid, that means you're folding, what is it, 128 by 128. So it's 128 folds like an accordion one direction, and then it's 128 the other way. So you're making squares basically.
Yeah, you make tiny squares, and all those squares will then like reference certain coordinates. Like basically it's a large matrix of coordinates, and you can then draw diagonals between those coordinates which is it's rather simple in both theory and practice. It's just like it's of course complicated in like doing it, but like the theory behind it is rather simple, and like you just make all the lines. But then with this, it's just I needed a 2x2 meter sheet, and when people think 2x2 meter, they actually forget that like you take 4 sheets of 1x1 meter and you put them into a massive fucking square, and it's an enormous pain in the ass to move. Like I will need to rearrange my room in here to when I'm going to fold the model, because like it's not enough with 2x2 meter. I need to also be able to move. So right now I am basically pre-folding 4 sheets that's 1x1 meter, and I make 64 grids on all of them. Then I'm going to tape them together, and with masking tape. I've done this before and it works. And then I'm going to spray color it so that it gets an awesome color kind of combination that I want. And then I'm going to start actually folding it. And I think I don't know how many weeks it's going to take, but it's also extremely boring to do all of the lines and stuff. I hate my life when I do it, and you get loads of back pain because like you just need to sit on the floor. I don't have a table that's big enough in here, so you need to sit forward, lean. Then like it's dreadful. But yeah, rather big project this one. But yeah, again, it's problem solving, and that's what I love about it. This is like I'm doing this like long planning process, like thinking what kind of paper, how I'll solve it, and then like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna go to that shop, I'm gonna go buy these colors, and I'm gonna spray it like this. Where should I spray it? Oh, I go to the basement, and then in the garage, and then I bring some cardboard boxes that I can put out on the ground there, and then I'll spray it and let it dry, and like all of these things make you excited because it's like you are actively trying to solve one problem. And I mean, now I'm making it sound like, oh, coronavirus, this guy is so productive. No, he's not. Like fucking boring, and like I'm hitting the wall. It's just like this is at least something that makes time pass. That is like what it does.
Yeah, it's one of these
So what about yours, Emmett? Now I want to hear. I'm
one, yeah.
curious.
So you're in on it. You already told you about this one. So one of the things I've looked at, there's this dude on Instagram. You find him on a thing called Prince Armory.
Oh, it's Prince
Yeah,
Armory.
Prince Armory. So he makes like fantasy comic book cosplay fusion armor
So cool.
and also fantasy stuff. So he's been doing it for years, and like his suits of armor, like they started about like 10 grand and go up to about 25 if you want all the details.
They're fucking sick.
Yeah. Obviously, I'm not going to buy one. Well, obviously, I wouldn't be allowed to buy one. Do we have a deposit for a house, or does Emmett have a suit of armor? Anyway, yeah. So, but he started doing an academy where he was making patterns, like practice patterns. But then on Black Friday, whenever that was, he'd done a sale for all the patterns at once, everything you need to make a full fantasy leather suit of armor.
Holy shit.
So I've got it. Now the only problem I had is all the shops I'd buy my leather from in Burson are all shut down. Support local when you can. So I haven't been able to go in. And yeah, so I'm waiting for them to reopen once we get out of lockdown. And then me and the editor for the podcast, Isaac, are going to make a suit each.
Holy
but the
shit.
nice thing about the pattern, because I have this background as well, it's kind of a base. It's the base like man of suit of armor. It's nice, but it's not fancy. But because I know how to modify patterns, I'm like trying to figure out like who should I cosplay? Who should I cosplay? I've been having this. It's a hard debate. If anyone wants to suggest like who you think I'd make a good cosplay character as,
Who
DM
should
them.
Emmett cosplay? Holy fucking shit.
Yeah, and that kind of check out the armor as well. That's really cool. And it's really interesting. This one is because it's what I like about the leatherwork. So it's this kind of. I taught myself what we call European style leatherwork, which is kind of what you would associate with like classic leather brands like Hermes and Louis Vuitton and all this kind of shit. Maybe not Louis Vuitton, they're a bit shit nowadays, but Hermes and shit like this. But this one is a completely new construction style. And it's not, obviously making armor is very different than making a wallet. So then it's like, okay, you get to learn new techniques. And this kind of thing is really interesting when you have a hobby like this. It's like, okay, I've got something precise. I've got a kind of group of hobbies. I suppose this would be, these are what I think about in painting. This would be the difference between, say, learning to paint with oil colors and watercolors or something like that. To very similar, but very different. So I'm kind of quite excited about that. I'm going to have my own suit of armor. I'll take suggestions. So that's my big project coming up this year. The other one I want to do actually is I want to take up bookbinding. This is my task for the year. I'm going to.
That's sick.
Yeah, I want
make a tome.
Yeah, basically, I just want to make an epic wizard tome for myself. Just like a big spell book that will probably have nothing in it because my handwriting is absolutely terrible. And I'll be like, don't write on the page; it will look terrible. But these are my two big goals in terms of hobby terms for the year.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It'd be cool. Have a leather book to go with my suit of armor. That would be cool. What? Yeah, so this is kind of physical hobbies where you're doing stuff, which is cool. What about hobbies where you don't do anything?
I mean video games or
video games,
kind of
video games, board games, things that are I don't know. It's passing the time, but when it's done, it's done. And that's kind of an interesting thing for me as well in terms of hobbies. I think like board games, video games, D&D, stuff like this come under this kind of category. It's like, I block out a period of time to do my thing. It's not too physical, which I think is important, but at the same time I'm getting enjoyment, and then it's done. I think these kind of hobbies are kind of, particularly nowadays when we're kind of all locked indoors, it's kind of important to have a few of them.
Yeah, I mean, like video games has always been kind of a large part of my life, like depending, like, or different levels at different times. But like I've found, or like there is a distinction that I've thought about quite a lot. I mean, I think that every single one of us, particularly you that are like listening to this, including me and you, are way too much on our phones. Like, and most people can agree that they are too much on their phones. Like I remember when I was younger, I used to be like, oh yeah, like, there used to be the argument kind of, that was more kind of the 90s idea that like video games whereas like just like watching TV indefinitely, that was not so bad for you for some reason.
Yeah.
And I find that, like, for example, anything that like tends to go just like into idling, such as the phone, sitting like indefinitely on internet doing nothing, like refreshing the same 3 fucking pages, or like stuff like that, compared to like, because when you're if I play like, cause I play Path of Exile, this game that is also a problem solving game to an enormous extent. It's so complex I can barely grasp all of it even after playing it for many years. But since there is a problem solving element, it's a very relaxing and kind of interesting thing to do. It's something that I like to kind of chill out and kind of out with. But there is still like you have a limited amount of it. Like you sit there and play, like, let's say that you do nothing at all day. You play it for 7 hours, like,
Yeah.
but like that's very rare. But like at one point you just be like, oh yeah, I can't do this anymore, because you're it requires something of you.
Yeah,
Whereas idling on your phone,
this requires some kind of mental engagement.
yeah, exactly, mental engagement. Whereas like idling on your phone or stuff like that, it requires nothing, so it can sort of go on indefinitely.
Yeah.
And I think that's why kind of the checking the phone and just zoning out, scrolling and stuff like that, it just gets your brain kind of going, hoping for like maybe the next swipe will be interesting somehow.
That's
And
basically how like they hook you to Facebook and everything else.
Yeah.
And slowly
Totally.
end up radicalized to some weird conspiracies. Because that's the only interesting, different thing that happens. You're like, oh my God, it's different and interesting. But yeah, it's definitely this kind of thing of like, they do have an end. I don't know. Some people I know, there's been a couple of times I had to ban World of Warcraft for one or two of my clients. You will remain nameless if you're lifting in, but I definitely had to go like, no, you have to install one. They're like, my life is terrible. Or, no, the life was good because they were playing so much Warcraft. Their training was terrible. Yeah, but it's kind of, video games are always an interesting one. I have this like weird love-hate thing with video games, I suppose, where I can get into them for quite a while if one of them grabs me, but then I can equally just begin to go, oh, fuck that shit, I just couldn't be bothered with it anymore. Looking at you, Skyrim. Definitely like, and sometimes it's just like if they just get a bit stupid, they thing. Like even Kaizo at the moment's just been annoying me too much. It's too... Kaizo, the problem like Kaizo Mario, the very difficult Mario we play sometimes, it's just like at certain stages it's just like it's too difficult, and you don't get. I don't have a lot of spare time, so I don't get like 3 hours.
You need to grind basically, like to get good enough, and that's I think where it stops for some people.
Yeah, it's
like,
definitely I haven't got 3 hours to grind on Mario at the moment, so I've kind of reached my level cap at the moment. I'll get back to it, but that's kind of always a fun one. Always kind of like games. I've been playing a lot of D&D lately as well. I've got 2 groups running at the moment. Got some of my high school friends into it, which is kind of funny because like they're the friends I'm still friends with like for quite a long time. Some of my oldest friends, but like I'd always be the weird nerd of the group, or just the weirdo, and they'd just be like your normal people basically. As I don't know, it's just normal. They just do normal people things, whatever that is. They watch football and rugby and these things, but like slowly, my friend's girlfriend is German. She's also a bit of a weirdo, and we kind of co-opted the group by going like, let's just try this out and see what happens. So then we got everyone playing D&D online, which is quite fun. So we got them into it, who are kind of. It's one of those things. Like I suppose if we go all the way back to high school, if we suggested let's play D&D, be like, oh no, nerd shit, but now they're into it. So it's kind of interesting just to get these kind of. Yeah, and then we have another games night once a week where a friend comes over, plays games. There's always this idea of just like, oh, it's got some, socializing. Let's face it, I'm probably not the most social people out there compared to other people. But when you're socializing with a purpose, I can do. And that's kind of nice in a hobby. Where it's like, oh, let's meet up and play games. I can do that. Let's meet up and talk about the weather and politics and thing. Let's play a game.
Yeah, I think it's I mean, it's always nice to have something to, or like a purpose in that sense. But I do tend to see that where I mean, one other like interesting aspect of hobbies or these types of how to call it, like enthusiastic endeavors of whatever sort, because if you have a hobby, there is some level of enthusiasm, there's some level of genuine interest for the subject matter itself within that, to whatever degree that might be. But like, it isn't your hobby if it's something you're fully indifferent to. Like, I don't play the violin because like I don't like, there's nothing wrong with violin playing. It's just that like it would be quite a far stretch for me to get there, because there's nothing about that is like grabs me at the moment. So just like having that level of or nurturing a little bit that level of fascination for something, and that like enthusiasm, I think is very healthy in general. Of course, like it does bring you some sort of joy and challenge and problem solving and all of that, but it also, I mean, if you do relate, like if you should like kind of pull the parallel back to, for example, hand balancing, let's say that you there listening is like, you're really interested in getting really good at it, and you're looking, for example, and analyzing, and what kind of mind state should you be in, and like all this kind of stuff that people have a tendency to perhaps sometimes overanalyze a bit. Like, well, like try to find out what kind of state are you in those activities you know you're good at, like those that you kind of know that is very, it's very intuitive to you. It's very kind of, you could always play the piano, so you don't barely have memories of not being able to piano. Where are you in your fingers, in your brain, in your existence when you play the piano really well? Because I can guarantee you that the mind state for doing like your handstands at whatever level that is, at doing them very well, will be a very similar type of mind state. And I think this is like, if we should be speaking crossover, I think this is a more relevant crossover than anything else. And as I mentioned before, that like when I was a teenager, and like we were basically talking, like me and my friends, we were basically talking about flow state, but what we were describing was having the smash feeling when we were playing Smash Brothers. Because if you had the feeling, you would just constantly do the right thing, and you just know you'd win. The others wouldn't stand a chance. And the next night it was the other guy, because we were equally good. He would be the one that just had it. And you were so frustrated, and you tried 100 times. You couldn't pull the law. Like, you would always just get wrecked. And I think like that mind state of just like, you just respond appropriately at the appropriate time. It's kind of, it's this weird zone where you almost see the future. Sometimes it can be the same. Like, I mean, I've had some nice, well, like when I was out dancing, for example, and it's just a really good mood, like had a beer, like everything's great. And like jamming to a tune, and I react to things in the music I didn't know was coming. And I'm like, holy shit, that was cool. I had no fucking idea that was coming, but somehow you're just so on that, like you're like, of course it's not seeing the future, but you're just, the likelihood of kind of being in tune with what's going on is very high. So I think that in any context that you might have where you have this sort of enthusiasm or this kind of like joy for it, or this kind of ease for it that you that you inevitably get when you're very good at something, like that's the state that you want to reach, because that is the intuitive state. That is the kind of as Daniel Kahneman describes it in Thinking Fast and Slow, that is you entering your system one, where you're not analyzing, you're not spending loads of precious mental energy and brain power on trying to deduct the second. Like the second is just like, or you just allow the body to do the job for you. And one other like short thing also, that like, now I'm ranting and raving here, but like one thing I was thinking about too, which is interesting with this enthusiasm thing in terms of hobbies and having something to do, is that I think it also helps you connect to other people in quite a nice way, because like I know jack shit about leather work, but when I hear you describe like, I'm going to do this with this pattern and then I'm going to change it, like I get invested. I want to try, or I want to see you do it. Like I get that feeling like, okay, what the fuck is this guy doing? Like he's got it. Like, because what you're describing is a sensation and a state. And I can recognize that state. I can recognize being in that kind of, or having that kind of feeling. And I think that helps a lot in terms of of connecting to others, because it's so easy to do that. Like, oh yeah, you practice handstand too. Oh, hey, cool. Can you do this one? Can you do that one? And then you have one level of discussion, but that is an obvious one because you do the same thing. But if you meet someone who's just like, hey, I play the clarinet, and you know what? Like, fucking hell, I got up at 6 a.m. and went on the roof and played clarinet because I had so much feeling. Like, tell me more about it. Like, or I collected stamps from 1954 in France. Like, yeah, tell me about those stamps, man.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely there's definitely something kind of in there of I remember I found this YouTube channel last year sometime, and it was some master carpenter. I forget his name off the top of my head. And he had hour-long videos. He didn't like hand joinery, other stuff. Clearly, he'd been doing it a very long time. And it wasn't unlike, there's a lot of people doing tutorials on YouTube, and they're pretty good at what they do. But this guy was a true master. Like, he was a grandmaster. We'll give him the title grandmaster. He had a video that was an hour long talking about steel rulers. And it was literally just like your normal steel ruler in 3 different sizes. And he spent an hour talking about them. And it was just like, I was like, yeah, obviously I use steel rulers and leather and this stuff. But like, for one of the most simplest of tools, just talking about that was unreal. And that was awesome. I just like watched it. And it was the first one I watched. Then I watched his other stuff, and it's like, it's equally as good. Maybe I wouldn't appreciate, like, there's a bit less simplicity because it might be like using a specific carpentry tool, like a chisel or a plane or something that, wouldn't. But that was just like, basically, there was nothing fancy about his ruler. It wasn't like I got a palladium coated ruler from the King of Prussia for doing his whatever. It was just like, here's the ruler I bought for like $8. Let me tell you everything you didn't actually know about the ruler and everything that why you might want it and how, and, it's that kind of like, that ultimate passion. And it's one of those things like what's interesting about a passion or enthusiasm in anything is it's cultivated. It's cultivated over a long time. You don't start out passionate about anything.
Extremely important point.
Yeah. Like you get into something or, your reason for starting something is always almost in a projection. It's fake. It doesn't exist because you don't have experience. You see someone ice ballet dancing and you go, oh my God, they must feel so graceful and so alive. And most of them are just like grinning and bearing and possibly thinking about their dinner. Yes, they are graceful and everything, but they probably don't even notice it. And then you do ballet class and then the first thing happens is your quads cramp and your glutes are cramping and, your arms get tired because you can't hold them up in the right position for so long. And then you get the reality of it. And then once you've had enough of the reality, then you can begin to get to know yourself in relation to the actual practice.
Yeah.
And this is what gives the passion. And if you can keep it going and start finding the
that's
details,
the threshold.
That's when you've put the seed in the soil and then you started to water it and you water your passion over a while. It's like a bonsai tree and then it comes up and, eventually get into something. You have to start making choices of like, oh, I'm into dance, but I'm not into hip hop. So I'll cut the hip hop branch off my tree. Oh, I'm into painting, but I don't want to do watercolor. So these kind of things. And then it's like you have your own kind of cultivated over a long period of time passion that kind of grows with you and as you develop. And then, maybe that branch will sprout again and you can change it. But this idea of like expecting to be into something and it to be amazing the first time you do it.
I've seen many people that come like, wow, yeah, I'm so into this now, whoa, and then like they meet reality and say, oh shit, yeah, it was a lot harder or a lot more painful or a lot more annoying than I thought, and then it kind of dwindles out. And I was like, yeah, I saw this coming a long time because like you were kind of, or I've seen people, I mean, I won't say fake in the enthusiasm. It's just like kind of it's kind of the initial burst, but it's not realistic yet. Like it doesn't know what it wants. And that's great. That's how it is to be a child. That's how it is to be an adolescent. But then like you will see whether or not you stick with it for long enough. And I mean, these kind of things can change and that's fine. There's nothing wrong in quitting and continue with something else. Like never give up is bullshit. Like, yeah, you might just see it wasn't for you and go spend your energy on something else that is equally kind of a good choice. But one thing that I was thinking about in terms of when you mentioned the steel ruler, like one thing that I'm hugely into at the moment, or like I was more into it before, but still a bit, but is speed running video games. Like, again, speaking video games, because like there are a few things as nerdy and as niche and as like kind of like insular. Like now it's gotten a bit more mainstream, but like the stuff that these people are doing and putting themselves through to speedrun these games, like you wouldn't believe like the amount of hours. We're talking thousands of hours to shave off milliseconds, microseconds in Super Mario Brothers 1, for example. And they have done like, they have run the code through various programs to find out what is the exact amount of frames, because the game runs at a certain amount of frames per second. How many frames from power on the console is it possible to finish the game in if everything was done absolutely perfectly by a computer, and then see how close a human can get to that? Like, it is mental, and they're breaking the games apart by finding out ways to exploit the code. Like, to any of you that are wondering what I'm talking about now, go and check out a video of like Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time 100% world record speedrun by a guy named ZFG. You won't understand anything what's going on, because Link is running upside down on a diagonal underneath the floor for long parts of the game, and I don't get anything what's going on, but it's glorious. And just the amount of dedication and passion and interest and love ultimately that is put into this, I think it's like, I have nothing but the deepest of respect for it. Sure, these guys are not curing cancer, but like they're putting everything, at least they have, into this. And like, I mean, these communities as well, like often there are people like kind of fringe people that like finally found their thing kind of. And I think it's enormously, I have loads of respect for that, even though the things are weird and quirky, because standing on your hands is weird and quirky too. There's nothing different between standing on your hands and speed running a video game. It's just that one of them makes you look cool. So it's, I think these things are very kind of, also just for quality of life. You wake up in the mornings, I'm going to shave off half a second. Like, you're going to do the fucking thing, and you have a purpose. You have a reason. Like, yes, it might seem dumb, but then again, like, we're all just strange monkeys anyway.
All those monkeys hurtling through space on a rock or surrounding an exploding ball of gas.
And like, there's one more thing. Now I'm ranting hardcore here, but one more thing I want to mention, and I'd like to add in the description. I think I even spoke about this before in a podcast, maybe a year ago or something. But one of my all-time greatest inspirations is Rodney Mullen, skateboarder. Basically the father of, like, maybe not most, I'm not that much into skateboarding, but of a lot of, like, basically modern skateboarding wouldn't look the same without him. And there's an interview with him by this this YouTube channel called Impact Theory, which I think the Impact Theory guy is kind of cheesy. Like, there's a lot of kind of success porn and stuff. It seems, I haven't watched so much, so I can't really judge it, but it seems a bit success porny. But
success porn could be your hobby.
Could too. But he interviews Rodney, and he obviously has loads of respect for Rodney. But it does seem like he's kind of, that Rodney is kind of surprising him with both the honesty and kind of just the answers he gives, because like there are few people that are as kind of pure in intention as Rodney Mullen. It's just like, he's a fucking, how old is he? 55 or something, 55-year-old that still skateboards. He wrecked his body in so many ways, and he just had to fix it because he had to skateboard. Like, that's just such a big part of him. And what he says is like, and it's so lovely to hear him speak about it, because there are few that lived it as anything as genuinely as this guy. He won everything. He was everything. He was the greatest skater of all time, and all that crap. And he just goes out. Yeah, like he just still goes out that night with his board, him on the board, like, and like what he said is basically just like, find that thing that you love and just become one with it. Just put every fucking thing into it, because in the end, like, as he says, like, these kind of things, you go through so many experiences with it, and ultimately, like, it ends up changing you as a person too, and I'm hopefully for the better. So check out that interview, like, because I can't say the things that he says because he's the one saying them.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I'd like to throw a counterpoint out to that one as well, because there is this kind of, there's almost a pressure to find that one thing you're good at and be the best at, this kind
Fair
of thing.
point. Very good.
And it's also okay just to do a lot of fucking things. There is, there is this kind of thing like of, oh, I'm just going to do this, and you don't have to justify it, and then I'm going to stop doing that, and I'm going to take up this. I'm going to learn a language. Okay, I'm doing my language class. Okay, I'll take up guitar. There isn't the pressure. This is the kind of thing. There's a lot of pressure to be really fucking good at stuff, which is good in and of itself, I think. But it is okay, like, to know when you've had enough of something. And it is one of those things with hobbies. Like, I have enough kind of side hobbies where it's like, okay, I've done enough of that. I've had enough fun. Now to put it away. And it's kind of, there is that kind of thing in life where it's like, yeah, you can go deep, and there's a lot of benefits to go deep. There is also just a lot of fun to go like, okay, I'm doing ballroom dancing. Oh, I'm doing climbing. Oh, I'm doing this. I'm doing that. And just do a lot of things. And I do think that is an equally valid point of view, I suppose.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, when I speak about these things, of course, I'm coming from my biased perspective, which just, I have a tendency to do things the way I do, which, yeah, has like kind of often a focus, but I think it's certainly important to not feel pressured by that either, in that sense, because then you end up doing it not because you like it. It's just, holy shit, yeah, I am having FOMO right now. I better do something with my time. And I'm sure that like most people have had that now with Corona, when you're kind of forced to not do a lot of things, when you're just like sitting, it's like, oh shit, I'm just sitting here like a piece of shit and I don't get stuff done. And 5 hours go to nothing. It's a weird thing to take in as well, in both the way we are conditioned as people by society and by thoughts such as the ones we're discussing now and so on.
Yeah.
And where you just have to go at a lower pace. And I remember you said it in a way earlier, cast kind of in the beginning of the COVID shit, was when you said something about just like, don't perhaps not expect as much from like goals and kind of all that stuff. Maybe it's not the time for that. And yeah, certainly agree. Like, I've thought about it too. Like, I was like, shit, okay, I want to heal up my shoulder, and I'm going to get back in training, and I'm going to get like where I was again, and la la la. And I was always kind of thinking like, yeah, I want to get back in a month or two. And now I'm just like, okay, maybe by summer. Like, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things. I think, I don't know, once you've developed a passion for something, in some ways it's like a nice old pair of shoes. I'm talking like, the more time you put in, it's a nicer pair of shoes, and you can put them away in the closet for quite a while, but then when you take them out and put them back on, they're still your old shoes. So it's kind of like, I get this with juggling a lot. Like, I pushed juggling and object manipulation probably to the highest anything I've done, and I kind of just got bored of it at a certain point, and I just said, okay, I just stopped. But it's kind of interesting that every now and then I pick it up, and it's just like, oh yeah, this is my old bicycle, I still got it, that kind of thing. And it's kind of interesting because, like, on object manipulation, I put in 10,000 plus hours of work. I had attained my peak that my physicality would allow me, I assume. I could probably push it a small bit further, but there wasn't much to do in terms of just like raw technical stuff. But it's just like, it is that kind of thing of like, oh, I just don't do it. I'll do it every now and then to pick things up, but it is that kind of interesting thing of like, I've done it, I got to where I wanted, I got all the things, and now I just put it away, and then I can still take it back out and still have a lot of fun with it. But there's this weird, like, still passionate, I still keep up on what people are doing, but at the same time, I don't have that feeling that I must be doing. I can still enjoy it and the side benefits I got without it.
Yeah, I think it's also normal. Like, I had that thing with origami actually from like in several periods. Like, so I remember that I bought a book called the Works of Satoshi Kamiya I must have been like 2021 or something at the time, and I was like, oh, this is a really advanced book by that guy that made a cool model I once saw online. I better get it. And I got it, and I folded a couple of the advanced models, and I thought it was really cool. I felt like, oh shit, I'm really getting somewhere. And then like, I kind of left it alone for several years and folded a model here and there. And then like 7 years later, after circus school, I kind of decided to try to do a model, and I don't even remember what the reason was. I was trying to to solve a crease pattern for some reason, and I did, and I managed to do a simple one, and then I suddenly just decided to do a more complex one, and then I decided that's my third one. Okay, I'm going to do Ryujin 3.5, which is the big dragon with all the scales, which was maybe not a great play, but I mean, I did manage with help from a guy from I think he's from Lithuania. Sent me messages on YouTube, but with that, it's very much like that. After that too, like I had like long periods where I wasn't folding at all. It could be like a year, half a year. And the interesting part was that with that kind of like that kind of work, because it's so much like old shoes, it feels entirely okay to leave it.
Yeah.
Like it feels as if you just like there's just this deep trust. You just I'm just not doing that right now, and you're not even questioning it. And of course, with stuff like hand balancing, that's a bit tougher because it's on the physique and on the kind of the micro corrections and balance and all of that. So it's a bit tough to take time off of it. But even if you do, and I think it's healthy to do, like, things come back again rather quick. And I know that everyone that does this, we tend to, oh shit, I'm injured. Oh no, I lost some stuff. Oh, it's going to take forever. But then like, a month passes, 3 months passes, and hey, you're back to where you were or better. And like remembering that no one stays on top all of the time forever either. Like you'll fluctuate and there'll be phases, and accepting that, like, it's quite nice. Like a new client that I'm going to start working with now, he wrote me and like, he wanted to program, and I asked him, how many days a week do you want to work? And he's like, yeah, you know what? I have 2.5 kids and I don't have enough sleep. So let's try 3 days a week. Four is asking too much. He said, I'm like, great. Like he knows that this is not the time to go all in, and it would be pointless to do so. Like, and then he's probably going to get those 3 sessions done, because and maybe not even all 3 sessions every week, but he will get done what he can. So yeah, like just knowing kind of the limits within what one is capable of at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. I got a lot to say in terms of training terms on that exact case. I'm not going to say it on this one because it's not a training cast, but I quickly have to say it is, if you have a client like this who has 2.5 kids or no sleep, and you think giving him 2 sessions a day or 10 sessions a week is a good idea, it's not. Even if they think it's a good idea, it's just not. Anyway, that's my little rant, because I've come across that situation so many times. Right. I think we should wrap it up there.
I think it's been a good 1 hour and something minutes of
pure rambling. And now, if you've gotten to the end of the cast, the true secret to one arms is...
Don't fall down.
Right. So, thank you for tuning in to the Handstandcast with me, Emmet and Mikael Christiansen. We didn't have any questions this week because the podcast was kind of framed around a group of questions we normally get. But if you would like to ask us a question on all and anything, or suggest some cosplay characters to me, you can send them to us at Handstand Factory on Instagram, or send them to us directly. Other than that, we'll be back next week. And other than that, have a good week.
Cheers.
The Handstandcast is brought to you by Handstand Factory and is produced by Motion Impulse. Thanks for tuning in. You can find a full transcript of each episode along with the show notes and any relevant references on handstandfactory.com/podcast. Thanks to Isaac for editing and Jordan for transcriptions. Music by Daniel Horwath. If you want to support the show, you can buy us a coffee on buymeacoffee.com or consider starting one of our Handstand Factory online programs. Links are in the show notes.